Hey, it's Jim Welninski for ON1, and today we're going to look at another one of my photos from Scotland. And for those of you that have watched some of my previous videos, you've seen those, and if you haven't been there, you should go, because it's a great place. It is a photographer's paradise. This castle we photographed early in the morning, and it's kind of weird because you would think that these big castles in Scotland would be big tourist attractions, but most of the ones we went to anyway really aren't. They're just kind of sitting there, and it's either the government or the local community that upkeeps the grounds, and you can see that obviously somebody's been mowing the lawn here and so forth. And because of the way the scene was set up that morning, the sky was really bright, and the foreground not so much because it was very, very overcast. So I had to expose for the sky. And what do you do with that? How do you fix that? How do I bring my foreground out and get a good blend between my sky and foreground so that I don't have any haloing? And I'm going to show you how to do that today. So the first thing we got to do is take care of a couple of little housekeeping issues here. There's a little no camping sign in here that I don't think the ancient Scots would have appreciated. So we're going to use the handy perfect eraser to get rid of that. And I love this tool, and you're going to see that it does a really good job. And there it goes. Perfect. And there's one other little thing in here. Where is it? There it is. And this is actually a flower, but it kind of gets in the way. So I'm just going to get rid of that too and let the perfect eraser go ahead and blend that, and it does so perfectly. So now we're going to jump out to full screen, and I'm going to make a copy of this layer. So we're going to ask for a copy, or I could press this little icon down here and tell it to copy. And I'm going to change my blend mode to screen and kind of get the castle. I'm just looking at the foreground now where I want it. I don't care about the sky because we're going to fix that in a minute. So that looks pretty good. I've got an eye on my histogram, and most of this bright stuff over here is probably the sky, as you'll see in a minute when we fix this. So I need a mask here. I've got to mask my sky out because now it's too bright. I've fixed the problem of my foreground being really dark, but my sky is way, way, way too bright. So let's mask that off. Let's use the perfect brush to do that. I'm going to make sure that my perfect brush is on, and my feather is at, I don't want it too soft, and I'm going to use a big old brush here, and my opacity is at 100%, and I'm just going to start to paint this back. And just getting as close as I can into my areas here that need to be feathered or that need to be replaced around the castle. And we're going to fix these edges because we've got some haloing, as you can see over by the hill there, but not to worry. We have a solution. So I'm going to make this bigger again and just kind of get in here and paint this like this. And I want to make sure I get it all. So I'm going to have to make multiple passes because the perfect brush is sampling the color that I click on, of course. So that could be a problem in some of these smaller areas where I've clicked up here and it's a different color. So I'm just going to get in here and click in here, and we're going to fix that. So I'm going to do the same thing in here and in here. So I want to make sure that I don't have any holes in my mask. So let's take a look at my mask. I'm going to go up into the View menu and just select Show Mask. And make sure that these areas here are painted in. So I'm going to turn my perfect brush off and just paint these in. And you could see in here that I've got some issues with my edges and stuff, but we're going to fix that. So I'm not worried about that. So I'm going to turn my mask view off. Now I'm going to go in and I'm going to show you how to fix these edges here. So this is always a problem when you're masking. You're always fighting this kind of haloing. And the solution to this problem is to feather this edge, and to feather it manually so that you're painting in some of the darker exposure, the darker part, which is in our case, the sky. So we're going to have to paint with black here, just along this edge. Because my sky is masked out, it is black. If I paint some of that darker exposure back into the hills here, by painting along the edge of this mask with black, I'm going to get rid of that halo. And that's exactly what we're going to do. I'm going to use a brush for this, and I'm using a Wacom tablet because it's awesome and it allows me a tremendous amount of control. I want to make sure that I've got a really nice feather for this because I want it to be really soft. And I'm going to work this in gradually and only use as much of it as I need. So we're going to be about 20%. Smaller brush. And so now I'm going to be painting out because I want to paint with black on my mask. And I'm just going to go along this edge just a little bit at a time. And you can see that that halo is going to go away. Most of it anyway. So I'm going to use a bit of a bigger brush. And I'm just blending this edge. That's all I'm doing. It's just a manual blend. So I'm just going to kind of go along here and work these edges. I'm going to zoom in a little bit so we can see what we're doing, because I want to make sure that we get all of this stuff. So I'm not sure what that flicker is, so kind of bear with me. And you can see the top of my hill getting darker, and that's okay. I don't mind that. It's just a little bit. And so let's look at my mask again. I'm going back up into my view and show mask. And you can see what's happening. I'm painting with black. I'm painting back some of that darker exposure, some of that area that I masked out. And I've got some issues in here. We'll fix that in a minute. But let's turn this off. Back in the view menu and show mask. So there we go. And I'm just going to continue to make brush strokes here until the halo goes away. And you can see that you can't really see the difference on my hills because the brush strokes are so light. So we're just going to work our way along this until we get it all taken care of. So I'm just going to blend in here a little bit and over here. So I'm just going to work all the way along here. Do the same thing in here and in here. I purposely left those because I wanted to show you how this works. You're not locked into an edge that whatever masking tool you're using gives you. You can go ahead and blend that edge in so it looks really good. Right? We've got a little bit over here, and you can see that now we're going to go back over to my hills, and my haloing is gone. I don't have any left. Maybe a little bit right there. We're going to fix that. Just like that. Okay, so whatever halo's there is probably reflected light or refracted light from the mountain itself. So now I'm going to zoom out. So I've solved that problem. So I have my foreground pulled out, and you can see that there is a little bit of a halo here. And I've got my foreground and sky blended really nicely just by simply using this blending technique. So let's take one more look at our mask. By going up into the view, you can use the keyboard shortcut as well. And there are my blending strokes. So my blending strokes are the black ones. Some spots I had to blend a little more. Some spots not so much. A few spots not really at all. So you're only going to add this blending where you need it. And as long as you do it that way, then you're never going to see this kind of halo that you get when you mask stuff. So let's start to work this photograph now. So if you watched the last video that I did on dodging and burning with blend modes, we're going to do that again and maybe take that a little further. We'll see how the workflow on this goes. One thing that I should mention is that it doesn't matter how many times I work a photograph, it comes out different every time. I don't know if that's true for you or not, but it has a lot to do with the way I'm feeling that day and kind of where the workflow takes me. But really always what I'm after when I'm editing is recapturing that kind of metaphysical experience that I have when I'm shooting. Because for me, shooting really is a metaphysical experience. Something happens inside me when I shoot, and that's what I'm trying to capture all the way through my process. That's really important to me. And you can use whatever word you want for that. You can call it vision, you can call it inspiration. For me, it is absolutely a metaphysical thing. So that's what I'm after. And that's, I think, a lot of the reason why my photographs change a little bit each time I work them. So let's make a stamped layer here. And we're going to change the blend mode of this to multiply, which is a darkening blend mode. And I'm going to just reduce the opacity of this a little bit because this could get out of hand really quickly if I don't do that. So I want to paint on the mask. And there is a mask on here, by the way, right now, but it's white. So I have to invert it, which makes it black. And I did that by hitting Control or Command I on a Mac. You can also do it up here in the mask menu. And now I'm going to paint with white. I'm just going to start to paint some shadow in some of the spots that I need it. So we're going to call this, I'm going to call this first layer. This is our master layer because that's our blend. This is going to be our burn layer. Okay, so I'm going to grab my brush, and my brush is going to be pretty soft. So I think I'm going to back it off to about 75 or so. That's a pretty good opacity. Make sure my perfect brush is off. And I'm going to reduce the size of this and just start to, I'm going to be painting in, and I'm just going to start to darken some of these areas that need a little bit of darkening. So what I'm really doing is adding a little bit of character to my castle, right? I like these places where surfaces meet and there's a curve because that allows me to get in there and kind of emphasize the shape, which I like to do because when we emphasize shape, that gives us three-dimensionality, or the illusion of three-dimensionality anyway. So these marks that are kind of coming down from these windows and such here, these are water marks. So water's been dripping down the side of this castle for, I don't know, 1,000 years or so. And after that long, you'd have marks too. So I might even add a couple just to give our castle a little more character. And I'm varying the size of my brush, and this is one of the reasons why I really love the Wacom tablet, and so glad that Photo RAW will support that tablet because it just makes my artistic interpretation so much easier because I can do it by hand, and you know, trying to edit with a mouse, kind of a nightmare. So we'll just give this a little like this, and that looks pretty good. So let's just take a look. Here's before, and here's after. So it's subtle, but as you build these effects up, the effect becomes really, the overall effect becomes really striking. So that looks all right. I'm going to work a little bit down in here and a little down here. And might work the edge of this just a touch. And now I'm going to start to work in my landscape. So I'm going to use a soft brush for this now. And I'm going to reduce my opacity a little bit more and make my brush a little bigger. And all I'm going to do is go in here and start to just emphasize some of these shapes. I want to get the clumpiness of the grass, right? Because this part's kind of grown wild. They just mow this so people can get up in here. So again, varying the size of the brush. And honestly, the key to doing this kind of work is patience and adding these effects in just a little bit at a time. Because if you add them a little bit at a time, they're not going to be obvious. There's nothing worse than a photograph that's obviously edited. Back when I was in the production business, I used to edit audio and video and did some animation and stuff. When I first started, I worked with a Grammy nominee recording engineer in Chicago. And it might have been my first day. It was certainly not long after. And he said, there's something I always want you to remember. The mark of a great editor, and I was editing dialogue at the time with a razor blade and a grease pencil. We didn't have computers then. The mark of a great editor is that no one ever knows you were there. So I want you all to remember that as you're working your photographs. No one should ever know that you made an edit in a particular spot. If someone can tell you were there, that means that it's not a good edit. Hate to say it, but it's the truth. So be subtle with your work. That's kind of the lesson here. If you're subtle, and subtlety's always good, right? So let's just zoom out and take a look at where we're at with our darkening. And yeah, that's looking pretty nice. So not overdone. I think I overdid it a little bit right there. So I'm going to go back in here. That might have been the first stroke I made. And I'm going to change to paint out and just ease up on that stroke a little bit. There we go. That's better. All right. And back to paint in. And a bit of a bigger brush. A little more here. And now I'm kind of looking at this globally, seeing what I need. So I'm going to go up into my mountain now and do a little bit of work in here. It was really hazy that day. And you could see how kind of flat this looks because of that. So I'm just going to add some shadow to some of these spots that I feel like kind of need it, just to give our mountain a little bit more definition and shape. So it doesn't, we don't want a lot here, just enough to give it a little contrast so it doesn't look so flat, so awful flat, which it really does. So just being careful not to get up too close to my edge here, because I don't want to interfere with A, the mask, and B, I certainly don't want to be burning in the sky. So that's looking pretty good. Let's just make this a little smaller. And so, you know, these little details, they make a big difference. And your photographs are going to look different every time you work them too, if you're working them as an artist and thinking as an artist and not so much as a photographer. We are photographers, but I feel that the camera just happens to be my medium. Honestly, sometimes I wonder if all photographers aren't frustrated painters. I think if we could paint, we would. I sure would, but I can't draw a stick man. And I don't know, I never really learned the craft of painting. Maybe if I had, I wouldn't be a photographer, which would kind of make me depressed, because with photography I can go all over the world and take great photographs and be in great places and not have to sit in one spot for a long time or just take a picture of something and then come back and have to try to recreate the painting. Not denigrating painters in any way. I love painting and I admire those that can do it. I'm just not one of them. So let's just take a look at the overall effect on our mountain here. Yeah, so that helps a lot, right? So zooming out, do I want to do anything in my clouds? Well, let's see. Maybe. So maybe just to add just a little texture to these clouds. Not a lot, just a little bit. A little three-dimensionality here. Really, really light brush strokes at this point. Barely touching the Wacom, right? Just kind of cruising along here. And I don't like that last two brush strokes. And that's probably going to do it. Okay. So let's make another, again, at this point, go back to my master layer. I'm going to turn my burn layer off, and I want to grab another copy of this, another stamped layer of this. So let's grab one. And there it is. And I'm going to drag this one to the top, turn the burn layer back on. I'm going to call this one Dodge. Okay, I'm back. I paused the video because the landscaper guy was right outside my window. It was either that or start over, and I don't want to do that because I like where this photo is going. So pardon my landscaper. He's a great guy, and he's just trying to make a living, so like the rest of us. So we are on our Dodge layer, and we're going to be adding some light now into some of these areas to bring out some of the grasses and the tops of these trees and some of the contour of these hills. So let's get to it. So I have a nice brush, and I'm going to increase my opacity just a little bit. We're going to go to about 25. And my perfect brush is off, and I'm going to be painting in. And the first place I'm going to start is right on this tree. I want to bring out, let's zoom in here a little bit, and I want to bring out some of the nice flowers and stuff that were starting to bud on this tree and just kind of hit this area here like so. That sounds like he's back. My landscaper guy. Love him to death. Awesome guy. So just checking to see, make sure that we're getting what we expect here. Let's, oh, I know what I forgot to do. Duh. See, even I get caught up. I forgot to change the blend mode to screen. That's what's happening. So let's reset this mask and invert it again, and now we can paint on it. So I could probably reduce my opacity again down to 20, and yeah, there we go. All right. So now if I turn this on and off, you'll see that we're getting what we expect. So even I get caught up in this stuff sometimes. I forget to do something. Don't get frustrated if things aren't working for you. There's a reason for that. Usually it's just a little thing like that. And you just go back and fix the problem and continue on with what you're doing. So we've got some nice contour in this tree. I'm going to go back to my burn layer for a second and just paint some shadow. Reduce the size of my brush. Just paint some shadow in some of these areas to just emphasize a little bit of the texture of the tree until we get something that looks really nice. Good. Awesome. So that looks nice. So back to my Dodge layer. And now we can start to work the bottom part of this landscape. So just making my brush a little bit larger, and I'm just going to start to paint on some of the tops of these grasses, and I'll got my hand on the two bracket keys, the left and right bracket keys, and I'm just going to switch the size of my brush as I need to while I work. So we want to emphasize the clumpiness of this grass. And, you know, I'm not going to get too carried away in here because then the grass is going to look too darn clumpy, and I don't want that. But I do want to emphasize some of this nice golden color of this grass. So sometimes making vertical brush strokes like this in these areas is helpful. And as I get further in here, I'll shrink my brush down and make those vertical strokes. And then not everything gets highlighted, right? Just parts, like it would be in actual life if I was standing here. So let's go along this edge a little bit. That looks great. Okay, so we're going to work this tree line a little now. And same way, just work up in these areas where the light already exists, and I'm just pulling it out. I'm not creating anything different here. Just working with what already exists in my photo. So your photo will speak to you like this. It will tell you what it needs. Just look at it and look at the way the light's working. And you're going to get all the instruction that you need from it. I want to bring some of this out a little bit. That's getting a little too dark in there for me. Just these shadows are a little too blocked out. So I'm going to get what I can out of it. And let's make this brush smaller and just kind of get in here. There we go. So some of those spots I'm not going to get anything, but so let's look at this tree line here. Before and after, before and after. And that's starting to look really nice. Okay. So we're going to zoom out 100%. And there's our dodging layer. So that looks nice. So if that's too bright, I can just change the opacity of this, obviously. So I think I'm going to drop it down a little bit to about 80. And I'm happy with that. Now, I'm not going to go in and do anything with the sky here because the sky's plenty bright. It doesn't need any help from me. But I am going to work some of these other smaller areas here just to emphasize the shapes of these and the contours of these hills, particularly over here on the side, because we've got all this nice shape here. So a little bit of a brush here and just kind of on the edge of that hill, right? Just in some of these areas, let's kind of hit this a little bit. And that looks pretty good. I think I want to bring up this back in a little bit, and if I can get anything out of here, let's get it out of there. And that's looking pretty darn good, I think. Maybe a little in that tree. So a little bit on the edge of the castle here where the light wants to hit, right? So before, after. Helps if you hit the eyeball. And let's zoom out a little bit and see what we've got as far as light on my castle. So I want to emphasize the contour of this tower a bit. So let's just give it a little bit of a highlight right there. And I think I want to bring out just a little bit right here. I like that. And maybe right here. So let's give it a little here and here maybe up on this corner to emphasize that corner, and just on the edge of this turret, like that. So we're starting to look pretty good now, I think. A little here. And I think I want to emphasize the top of this doorway just a bit. Like that. Good. So let's zoom out. And let's have a look at our dodging layer. So I like that. That looks really good. I think we've got one kind of stray brush stroke here that I'm not crazy about, and that's this one right here. So always looking at the work that you're doing. Let's just paint that back a little bit, and I'm happy with that. Okay, so let's finish this off. I'm going to grab a stamped layer, and we're going to name this Effects, because that's where we're going. And I'm going to go into the Effects module, and I'm going to grab a tone enhancer, and I'm after the curve, so let's pull this down like that, and grab a masking bug, and I want the linear top, exactly what I want. So let's just close off the bottom of this photo a little bit, just like that. We can adjust this curve if that's not right. That looks pretty good. We're going to grab another tone enhancer and do the same thing. I'm after the curve, but this time I'm looking at the top. I'm looking at the sky. I'm going to bring down those highlights there a little bit, and just by pulling the highlight section of the curve down and darkening that, and I can adjust this curve after I make my gradient. So I'm going to grab the masking bug again and change this preset to linear bottom and just click and make this a little wider, and maybe not that wide. That's pretty much what I want. That looks good. And let's grab one more tone enhancer. And this time I'm after the curve again, but I want to brighten like this. And I'm going to pull the bottom part of my curve down here to just maintain some of that contrast. I don't want my darks getting too out of hand here. So let's actually invert this mask and then grab the brush, which is the masking brush. And I got 100% feather, 46% opacity. My perfect brush is off. That's perfect. Let's just make a nice big brush here. And I want to make sure that I'm painting in. And just click here a couple of times and open up some parts of the photo that need to be opened up. And maybe right in there. And we can call that done. So you're not stuck with what the software gives you, but use the software as an interpretive tool so that you get what you want, what you envision, what you think is important. This is Jim Welninski for On1. I hope you had as much fun watching this as I had making it. Thanks a lot, and I'll see you next time.